Before I address the changes we've made, I'm compelled to comment about a few things going on in our city and frankly across our country. We are inundated with extreme thinking, which is adding to the volatility and creating divisiveness at levels, frankly, we've never seen. I have no doubt that change is needed and it must happen now. I hear daily through emails, letters, meetings, or stopped on the street a variety of things. One, residents who are fearful. They want more officers out on the street. They want more aggressive enforcement. They want everyone stopped. Then I hear from community members who are fearful of the police, who want less enforcement, less arrests, and reform. And then I hear from officers who are fearful for their own safety, and frankly afraid to lose their job for simply doing their job. This is not an either-or proposition. Everyone is right, and I hear everyone. This weekend alone, we had 2 shootings Saturday with 3 victims who were shot. Sunday, we had 3 shootings with 5 victims. This divisiveness is creating an environment that is ripe for those who choose disorder and violence over peace and cooperation. We also know we cannot make progress until we fully understand and acknowledge history and all that has occurred. There has never been a time where tension between police and communities of color have been without tension. That is unacceptable and must change. To move us forward, my role must be to create a balance of appropriate levels of enforcement, community engagement, and community partnership. We need to address explicit and implicit bias. We must be seen as legitimate, trusted, and grounded in constitutional policing. To be clear, I'm not trying to return to somewhere we've been. I'm actually trying to go somewhere we only hoped we could go. Public safety for everyone continues to be our #1 priority. With violent crime on the rise here and across the country, we must support our officers who are dealing daily with these violent offenders as we expect them to protect each and every one of us. Policing has always been dangerous, but now we have officers being assassinated in this country for simply wearing a uniform. I am grateful to each and every officer and fully support the heroic actions my officers make every day. The officers of the City of Minneapolis handle almost 500,000 calls, 500,000 calls for service each and every year. They do so most often without using any force at all, most often with community satisfaction, and quite often with community partnerships. I'll talk about that a little bit, but we have 2 of those partners here today. At the same time, I fully acknowledge throughout this country there's been instances of excessive force and unconstitutional policing. If it happens here, we must hold those accountable and hold them to the highest of standards. Our community and our officers deserve this. We cannot have public safety without public trust. Today I speak not only as the MPD chief, but also as a board member of the Police Executive Research Forum for the past 3.5 years, and as a newly elected board member of Major Cities Chiefs Association. We've been aggressively and proactively recommending and implementing progressive policy and training changes. That includes the PERF's use of force guidelines that many of you have seen. There are approximately 18,000 police departments in the United States, and we believe that's far too many. We are looking at long-term goals of regionalization, better training, and more consistency in policy and procedures. This must be done nationwide, not simply locally. Today, I encourage everyone to come together. We need thoughtful people to sit down and engage in dialogue and come up with solutions, frankly, not simply finger pointing. I encourage people to join the MPD team. I want people from our community to serve our community. I've said it before, but in the words of my colleague and friend, Chief David Brown from Dallas PD, he said, quote, "We're hiring. Get off that protest line and put an application in. We'll put you in your neighborhood and help you resolve some of those problems." I hold myself ultimately responsible for leading the way and start with the question, what can I do as a chief? Today we announced just a sample of the progressive initiatives we have put in place to help foster trust and legitimacy in all of our neighborhoods. You will be hearing about many of them in the weeks and months ahead. We have also created a place for all of our initiatives to be highlighted on our website, InsideMPD.com. It's not live yet, but it will. so everyone could look at those as the changes occur. In 2013, as the mayor said, when I became chief, we began this path forward on cultural and organizational transformational change with the inception of MPD 2.0, with the guiding principle being that foundation. The question every officer should ask themselves: did my actions reflect how I'd want a family member of mine to be treated? That answer should always be yes. And if it's not, we need to look at training and discipline up to termination to resolve that issue. I believe all of my officers have prescribed to and fully support that guiding principle. Last May, we continued this transformation when the President's 21st Century recommendations were released. Okay, so what I did is, when the recommendations were released, we took all the recommendations, and so this is eventually, very soon you'll see online, each of the pillars. So you've got building trust and legitimacy, and the first recommendation there, and then we decided to look at what is it we're currently doing that might fit into that recommendation, and what else can we do that we're not doing. And so this fits into every recommendation and every pillar. In the first pillar, building trust and legitimacy, we have more than 37 recent initiatives in the first 3 years. We've got the national initiative, the OJP. I know it's hard to see. This is kind of a snapshot because we're going to list them all out. Chat with the chief, cops out of cars. Pillar 2, policy and oversight. There's a variety of procedural justice training. There's 3 modules in procedural justice training. All of the officers have been through 1 and 2, and they'll be starting 3 in October. Creating a culture of accountability. I brought in an organization called Partners in Leadership to train all of our leadership on culture of accountability. Let's go to 3. Technology and social media. Has anybody heard we have body cameras? You just want to make sure. Also on their NIBIN. Incredibly valuable right now with the gunfire and the shootings that are occurring in this city and across the country. That NIBIN machine helps us connect guns to each of those cases, and sometimes we can help connect people to those guns, and it's much quicker than it used to be when we had to try to figure this out without that equipment. Pillar 4, community policing and crime reduction. It's hard to see, we ran out of space, but there's about 36 initiatives, including, which I have no doubt, another record of being the largest turnout and national night out for the 5th year in a row. If you didn't see that video, you should see that. That's when I really got to hear from a lot of people and understand how much people in our community value the police department and want to partner with us. We have created a police community support team. It's important that when we have a critical incident or a crisis out on the street, that people can help the police department, and I have 2 of those people here, Brenda Johnson and Lisa Clemens, and then Lieutenant Zimmerman is also here. So it's a combination of police and community members. We've got faith leaders, social service workers, residents, just a variety of people from all of our precincts that we actually call upon when a critical incident occurs. They were busy this weekend, unfortunately, but they have become incredibly valuable for us. They're generous with their time. They respond to scenes. They share information with residents so they don't have misinformation, so they're the first one. They don't have to watch the news to find out what's going on in their neighborhood. They can find out from these PCST members. They can help people with what resources are available. Violence doesn't just impact the person that was injured, it impacts neighborhoods. It impacts other people, not just family members. This embodies police community relations, and I want to thank them and all of those who go out. They do this on their own time, without question, and I always know who's going to respond. And I feel comfortable also knowing that they're out there giving that information. They are a part of the MPD family. Let's go to 5, training and education. Looks smaller, but not. Some of the things we haven't been able to get on there yet. We want to make sure that we list all of this stuff and we have everything live. Things that are coming from the national initiative. We've had recommendations from the OJP review that we had. Fair and impartial policing training. Every member of this police department for the past 2.5 years have been trained in fair and impartial policing. That also addresses implicit bias, which is in addition to the procedural justice training. Next slide. 6 is officer wellness and safety. What's a big component of this and very important is our early intervention system. That came out of the Office of Justice Program's recommendations, something that I knew early on was not adequate, and we need that first and foremost for our officers. When it comes to use of force, and you're going to hear more about this from Deputy Chief Arredondo and Commander Schoenberger, we have looked at the Police Executive Research Forum guidelines. Not only have we looked at them, this department was an active member of putting them together. So we had those early on and we started putting things in place already. Our use of force is very consistent with those guidelines. Where we could make changes, we have. That will be another thing that's listed on our website. What are the guidelines and the recommendations? What is it? What changes have we made and what changes are yet to be made? One of those is the sanctity of life. And so today, I want to let you know that what we have added is sanctity of life in our policy as the cornerstone of our use of force policy. In life-threatening situations, preservation of all life is held in the highest regard. What does that mean? You've always heard that at the end of the day, an officer goes home safe. I expect officers to go home safe, and I want them to go home safe. But I want everybody to go home safe. That's the mindset. It's about slowing things down when we can. We can't always slow things down, but we want to make sure, as a society, frankly, we have taught and told officers we want very quick resolution. Hurry up and answer that call, get to the next call. Hurry up and resolve this situation. He's got a knife, he's got a gun, take care of that quick. And we're saying, you know what, slow down. Slow down for everybody involved, and slow down for the officers. Most officers who engage in deadly force retire early. Retire in post-traumatic stress duty disabilities. We have some of those in our department. So it's important that we let officers know it's okay to slow down. It's okay to back up if reasonable. To go into a little bit more about our de-escalation policy, which is another policy you're going to hear about in detail, is Commander Schoenberger.
Good afternoon. As the Chief mentioned, the new de-escalation policy represents a shift in how police train and respond to the community. This is not new. De-escalation is not new. Our first de-escalation policy and training occurred in 2009, and there's been several evolutions of de-escalation training since that time. What is new is that de-escalation will become the core foundation of our use of force and defensive tactics training. So what does that mean? The old policy was that officers were encouraged to consider de-escalation as an option, and often this consisted of nothing more than communication, which is important. But going forward, the comprehensive de-escalation training will involve training officers in the appropriate use of distance and cover to protect themselves and to slow down calls when they can. We don't want them rushing in too quickly if they have the time to slow down. So using distance, using cover, increasing the amount of time, we believe will allow them to better assess what they're facing as a threat. Whether this person is maybe engaged in a mental health crisis, whether this person is dealing with chemical issues, and in slowing down these calls, we believe that this will result in increased safety for officers and the community they serve. Starting today, 32 new police recruits began their first day of the academy. They will be the first officers to receive an in-depth, comprehensive de-escalation policy and training. In October, the nearly 200 field training officers that will receive these cadets and recruits on the street will also be trained in this. And then shortly after that, the rest of all patrol officers and supervisors will be trained in the new de-escalation policy. We also believe that the de-escalation policy and training complements our current efforts to train all patrol officers and patrol supervisors in crisis intervention team training. Beginning in 2016, we had a goal of training all patrol officers and supervisors in week-long crisis intervention team training. Through the first half of the year, we have just over 50% of patrol officers trained in this, and beginning in October, we'll complete the rest of the training so that by the end of 2016, again, all patrol officers and their supervisors will be trained in a full week of crisis intervention team training. These policies together, again, will improve safety for officers and the community they serve. Deputy Chief Arredondo.
Welcome, everyone. In continuation of Chief Harteau and talking about some of the other guiding principles as it relates to policy, I want to note two very important ones. And one that you will see online now in our new policy is 5-303.01, which is duty to intervene. And in part, it states, "It shall be the duty of every sworn employee present at any scene where physical force is either being inappropriate applied or is no longer required, that that sworn officer has a duty to intervene to stop the other sworn officer from continuing to use that force." The policy places that responsibility on an officer if he or she observes that inappropriate application of force continuing to be applied when it is no longer needed. Now, while it has always been the expectation of every sworn Minneapolis police officer to intervene, what this policy clearly does is it gives an affirmative affirmation that you must, as your duty, to once again to keep our community safe, to intervene, even if that means preventing or stopping that officer from continuing that force. The other guiding principle policy that we've just added is the duty to report, which also reads in part, "Employees must immediately or as soon as reasonably possible report any misconduct at a scene or an incident to their supervisor or supervisor at the scene, also as well as to the Internal Affairs Unit. This includes but is not limited to misconduct or force, and that employee now has a responsibility, if he or she is just even observing it, to report that force or that misconduct that was applied. And that once again further upholds our obligation to the communities that we took a solemn oath to protect and serve. And these once again are so very important in terms of the guiding principles that we as the Minneapolis Police Department want to continue to move forward. I think it's also important to note that as part of the culture shift and change that Chief Harteau has been instilling is making sure that we're taking great opportunity to reach out to both our community and work with obviously our Police Conduct Oversight Commission in terms of receiving invaluable insight and consultation as it relates to helping us to guide these policies moving forward. So, thank you.